Hello, good evening. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Connect Africa. Welcome to our Thursday session. So for today, as suggested, we are going to analyze the African Union and all the regional, the RECs, as they call them, or the regional bodies, their historical formation, their achievements, their pitfalls, and what needs to be done um, forward in the way forward. But this has come really on the right time because this is really the best time to do it. Just becomes that's why we were late by half an hour because a few minutes ago a news came out, or an hour ago maybe. ECOWAS have had a meeting with member states, and even where Eastern African community representatives have participated, and in its resolution, an interesting resolution came out from this meeting. So before we go and analyze the institutions, which includes also ECOWAS, we are going to update you about Niger. So for that, Kwame is here. Kwame, welcome. Yeah.
Thank you, Mahlet. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Oh, thank you. And greetings to everyone. Regards. We thank you for the support you are giving to the channel. We hit 5,000 subscribers yesterday. So we are glad for all those who have
Yeah.
supported the channel. So we ask you to push us further and further. As you are seeing, things are unfolding at a very rapid rate on the continent. And of course, some sad news has just come up, as about Niger, that ECOWAS has directed its standby force to be activated in order to be prepared to attack Niger. So we don't know. We cannot conclude that they are going to attack, but definitely we are keeping an eye on them. But even if they attack, this should not be. It should not create a very big sense of helplessness within us. We know that the timing is very right for us to act. So this should even spur us even further on to do more. If they attack Niger, this should push us to do more, because the enemies of Africa now, they have shown themselves. We know them. We know the group of men who have stood up and now have decided to stand against the interest of the African people. So that now this puts us in a position where we know who the number one enemy of the African people is. Of course, we know the United States and France and the Europeans are on the other side. But even internally now, we know them. They have come out in broad daylight to show their faces. And that means that if we get our chance also, we treat them in the same way. We treat them like how we would treat them. We would treat the enemies of the African people and the African continent. So I think there's no even reason for us to despair. Yeah, so as Mahlet has introduced the topic, and of course, this is a regional bloc, ECOWAS, and we want to talk about, somebody said yesterday, we should talk about the African Union and the regional bodies and break them down and their relevance, their achievements, or their failures, whether they have failed. And of course, everything we take it through at the lens of history. We must see everything through the lens of history always, because they were created at some point in history and for a certain purpose. And we want to examine, have they been able to fulfill that purpose? And there was people who were against the creation of these regional bodies also. Have they been vindicated, looking at the performance of these regional bodies? So these are the things which we want to sift through and examine what these regional bodies are doing to the African continent, ECOWAS, East African Community, SADC, the community of Central African states, in the Maghreb. These communities, are they doing more harm to the African continent than we need? These are the questions which we want to answer today. So we welcome you once again if you are out there watching us. Mahlet, back to you. And once again, thank you for everyone who's with us, and invite others so that we can have this discussion, and you give us your thoughts, because these thoughts actually came from someone who was watching here yesterday. And we like this, that you give us what you are thinking, topics, and then we can come and discuss this together as Africans, because we say that the continent is going to be rescued by us working together and supporting each other until we take it back from the colonialists who are still fighting to keep it for themselves, for their exploitation and exploitation and killing of the African people. So this is what we want to prevent as African people. Mahlet, back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Kwame. Really, such a disturbing moment for us. So, from the let's start with the Niger update, and then we move to this institution, which is really quite related. So, ECOWAS, in its resolution, said. The highlight is that they put their ECOWAS force to be stand by that on the red line. But of course, they also said they are still open for the diplomacy, for the diplomatic solution. And then an interesting thing is that they have also requested for the African Union kind of to approve it, which last time we have talked, do you remember that AU and ECOWAS do not seem on the same page? You remember you also analyzing that when I saw that question. So it kind of proves our that hypothetical assumption now. And then so the last one is putting the ECOWAS force on a standby, which the Western media did not talk about the others. They are flying away with the last one that now ECOWAS is ready to fight.
Yeah, they are more interested. The Western media is more interested because the West is
so
more interested in attacking. So they pick out, that is the one which they always
go on
pick
and
out.
update us.
Yeah, so yesterday, I know I spoke about, we spoke about the fact that the Emir of Kanu went into Niger and met the coup leaders in Niger. And he came back, of course. When he came back, he was able to brief President Tinubu Bola Ahmed, of the president of Nigeria, on his, interaction with the government, the current government in Niger. But today, of course, there was this meeting of ECOWAS, which was called to deliberate on the events that have transpired since the end of last week. It is coming to almost a week, because Saturday, Sunday was the deadline which ECOWAS gave to the government in Niger. They have formed the government, by the way. They have appointed ministers already in Niger. So right now is a full government. It's no more just a junta. So that is why I'm calling it a government, even though the Western people still want to call it a junta and what a coup leaders and stuff like that. But it is now a full government because they have appointed prime minister and other ministers, and they are now governing the country. So they refused the ultimatums which were given by ECOWAS, and this means they were not able to follow up on the threats of ECOWAS. Instead, they mobilized their people and said the people should be ready to defend their territory and their country. And so this did not go very well down. Did not go down well with ECOWAS because they feel that maybe they are somehow disrespected, maybe somehow. But of course, Victoria Newland, as we mentioned, visited. She's putting pressure so that there can be a military attack. And as we mentioned, this woman is a very dangerous woman. Is very evil. The woman is very evil. She has killed a lot of people. She has participated in the death of many people. Under of course, the work of the hand of the United States and the Europeans. These are the groups which are killing a lot of people across the world, sowing chaos all over the world, while at the same time talking about democracy and human rights, which is pathetic, and it is a lie. It is an absurd lie. It is an outright lie. The United States and Europe have no right to talk about democracy and human rights, looking at their record, their historical record regarding violating human rights and breaking down democratic governments and supporting dictators all across the world. They really have no right, from a historical point of view, of talking about human rights and democracy. Now, Victoria Newland has been, of course, uh, in Niger. She came in secret, and they forced themselves. The United States forced, themselves in. So I will not go very much in all the reasons, because we have broken that down yesterday and in the previous videos. So you can
Mm-hmm.
go to our channel and check out those videos, because we have broken everything down already. We can't put everything in one video because we only have a very limited amount of time to be here in order for us to break down everything that is happening within and why it is happening. So we have done a lot of videos about this subject ever since it started. So just check out on Connect Africa. We have everything has been analyzed. Now, what is happening is that ECOWAS called this meeting. They want to evaluate the situation and what is happening, and the fact that uh, Niger has formed a government and they are not into those threats. They are not giving in to the threats. And of course, again, ECOWAS sent in the African Union and the United Nations, and they refused to meet them. Instead, they decided to meet the emir of Kano in northern Nigeria, because the governors and the people in northern Nigeria have said that they cannot accept having an invasion of Niger, because they have relatives over there. Nigeria has over 1 million citizens in Niger itself. So they do not want that chaos to affect, because it will affect the north itself. Now, the resolutions that are coming out of this meeting, which has been held by ECOWAS, is that they recognize that the army or the government in Niger is adamant and has refused, is defiant. They use the word defiant, has defiantly refused any diplomatic contact with ECOWAS and their imperialist masters. That is the United States and the United Nations and all of them, that they recognize that they have refused, and therefore the diplomatic solution, they have rejected it. This is what ECOWAS said. So they said that as far as they are concerned right now, all options now are on the table, including the continued application of sanctions on Niger and closing all borders and blocking off all financial institutions. And also the military solution is still on the table. These are the things which they said, that the military solution is still on the table, and therefore they have ordered the ECOWAS standby force to be activated. Activated, it means it has been told to stand by for orders anytime they can give order for it to go into Niger and attack Niger. In this also, they said that the regional bodies or the regional countries, the countries in the ECOWAS community, are called upon to support the resolutions of the meeting of today in applying, of course, the sanctions and applying the military solution. It means applying also the military solution, because some of the countries have not agreed to go in for a military solution. Countries like Liberia, others which we have mentioned, have not accepted to contribute troops. Only a few, about 4 countries, have agreed to contribute troops to this invasion which they want to carry out and invade Niger. Now, they also asked the African Union to support them in this invasion of Niger. They also asked the United Nations that it should come and support them in this. And of course, the United Nations, when they say the United Nations, of course, they are talking about the United States and Europe, because they are the ones who are controlling the United Nations. And it means they are calling on imperialism to come and work with them so that they can put down any rebellion against imperialism and neocolonialism. This is what they mean. The people present, the African Union was present, ECOWAS, as we know itself, is present, and the East African community also was present, which I like very much, which is a very good sign that even though he may not have been given a chance to speak and give the thoughts or the views of the East African community and what they think about this situation, it was there. I would have loved to see SADC also present, and Maghreb and all the other countries. And of course, we know Algeria has voiced out support for Niger, and it doesn't want any chaos in the situation. But all the other parts should have been around. African Union was there, ECOWAS was there, East African community was there, because the chairperson or the chairman of the East African community, the president of Burundi, President Ndayishimiye, was around in this meeting today. So what we are seeing is that there's a possible, of course, disagreement. SADC has disagreed, especially South Africa, because South Africa right now is the one which almost runs SADC, has disagreed with the approach of using military force and thinks they should use peace. They should use diplomatic means to solve this problem. And the AU also is not very much on the wagon of using force, because we know that the African Union had set 2020 as the year of silencing guns. So if you are talking about silencing the guns in 2020 and you failed, you can't be the same person who is supporting another group of people to invade fellow Africans and carry out another bloodshed. And this is increasing the sound of the guns instead of silencing them. So the African Union is not very much on board when it comes to using force. So that is why they say that they're asking the African Union to support the resolutions of the conference, the ECOWAS conference that has been held. So, of course, this gives us some hope. There's hope that there's still divisions among. So how do we look at it? What should be our conclusion from our assessment? Of course, this one we will talk about it also, but let me first go back to Mahlet. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kwame, for that. Yeah, I can feel it from your voice how much this disturbed you. And all of us, I'm sure, everybody who is here, we have had so much hope that maybe the ECOWAS is trying to save its own face, because there is a lot of opposition within. Yeah, there are some countries that have supported, but we can count them. I think maybe a handful of member states in ECOWAS. The fact that AU has been silent speaks for itself. I'm not saying that AU is a better institution, but but we haven't seen anything coming out except the very first day where they condemned, and that is 26 July. After that, AU said nothing about Niger. So that is really, needs to be explained. But now, let's go to our today's topic, which is analyzing these institutions, and if there are events like this, whenever a crisis happens in the continent, it kind of reminds us how useless, toothless these institutions are, because it is somebody else, and a non-African state comes and do whatever they want. Countries like France, Western Africa is their territory, and even in East Africa, South Africa, UN can come and do whatever they want. Or also NATO, we know what they have done in Libya. So before we go and analyze their achievement and failure, just quickly tell us about their formation, like AU slash the main regional bodies, but really briefly. Yeah, back to you.
Mahlet, can you come again? Can you come again? I didn't hear you very well.
Yeah, so before we go and analyze their failure or achievement, can you give us a brief background, that help us to understand what's happening today about their formation, AU slash the main regional bodies in the continent, particularly ECOWAS, AU. Yeah, but very briefly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So the events of the formation of these regional bodies actually start when we were entering the phase of independence, when we are entering the independence phase. And Nkrumah himself had seen when he was coming back, he wanted to unify West Africa into a nation, into West African states. So Nkrumah in the beginning, Kwame Nkrumah was for, of course, regionalism. He thought that Africans in the western part of the continent should work together to be able to unify and as one state when they get their independence. This is the periods when he had just come from England in 1947. He had just come from Britain, and he was coming back to Ghana. He passed through Liberia. So he wanted to convince his fellow freedom fighters during that period. And that is why he passed through various, he had some sort of tour, and he passed through various nations in West Africa to be able to convince them that they should be able to unify under one, state to form a very strong West African state on the African continent. But on closer analysis, Nkrumah abandoned that stand, and he started advocating for the unification of the African continent as a whole. Now, of course, later, other people would come up with different ideas, and Nkrumah was strongly and consistently advocating for the unification of the continent, and he put this in some sort of stronger gear after independence in 1957 in Ghana. In 1958, immediately called a conference of independent African states and all freedom fighters who were struggling for independence. And the other Africans across the globe, including the African diaspora, were very present. They came so that they can share notes on how to defeat imperialism and colonialism during that period. So we had African diaspora during even that conference. We had people like Patrice Lumumba was around. So he made sure he mobilized all the continent, and he got various people who were fighting for independence in the various states on the African continent, and all of them, they were represented in 1958 in Accra. His goal was to push for independence, and as he was always saying, that Africa's independence is supposed to be in 3 stages: gain independence, consolidate the independence through unity, and then start the reconstruction process. So he was starting that process to help the others to get independence so that we can jump onto unification of the continent. This was supposed to be the consolidation of that independence, because if we did not consolidate it, then we would lose it. The enemy would interfere and start taking away that independence, like what we are seeing today. So other groups, of course, they argued in the opposite direction. People like, President Julius Nyerere, Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, who believed that we should go slowly and unite at regional levels, even though Nkrumah was pushing rapidly, and others in Nigeria, Tafa Balewa, and then in Liberia, also the president in Liberia. So this is what actually led to the creation of the so-called Monrovia and Casablanca group, where we created 2 groups. One group was people of who were saying that we should have a unified Africa, and another group was for people who were saying we should go slowly and have regionalism and create these regional bodies. And on the other group, which had people who were saying we should form a union government now of African states, you had Nkrumah, you had Abdul Gamal Nasser of Egypt, you had Sekou Touré of Guinea, you had Keita of Mali, and a couple of others. So this was the Casablanca group and then the Monrovia. So that is why Haile Selassie invited them, because they had these differences. And Nkrumah, of course, compromised. They reached a compromise because they didn't want to leave Addis Ababa in 1963 when they met without forming something which will hold the continent together. And of course, this you would want to give a lot of credit to Nkrumah, because if he had not pushed them very hard, even the African Union, which we have, we would not have gotten it, because many of them were just lax. And you want to give also a lot of credit to Haile Selassie, who succeeded in, galvanizing these people and bringing these people with different ideas, which we are contesting that period, together. So when the OAU was formed, and of course this was the doorway to the formation of the other regional bodies. Those regional bodies were able to be formed to the point where they are right now. And Nkrumah strongly stood against the formation of these regional bodies. The person who was leading this assault very much was Nyerere, who was arguing. He was a very, good intellectual, and he could argue a lot. It's just that Nkrumah was much more advanced in understanding how imperialism worked and how colonialism worked. So they had even their contest that Nkrumah was very friendly to the president of Uganda. The president of Uganda, when he married his wife, actually he had his honeymoon in Accra. And so Nyerere wanted to unify actually East Africa and form the East African community. Nkrumah worked with his friend, who was the prime minister of Uganda during that period when it had gotten independence, who was Milton Obote. He was called Milton Obote. He was a very good friend of Dr. Nkrumah. They worked together, and Nkrumah actually sabotaged the East African community so that it would not be formed during that period. And Uganda at that time pulled out of the East African community. So it started on a lower note and collapsed because Nkrumah did not want it. He wanted them to come and form the unified Africa, form the union government of Africa. Now, what he wanted, those are the things which we will look at later. But this is just a little bit of the background on these institutions which we have today. And of course, the Organization of African Unity, which was formed in 1963, would later be transformed in 2002, with the Sati Declaration, would be transformed. The Sati Declaration was in Libya. That time, President Muammar Gaddafi was the one who was very passionate about the formation of a union government, was pushing very hard. So they transformed the Organization of African Unity into African Union with the purpose of being more effective. The purpose was for the African Union to fast track the process of integrating Africa militarily. Even during the Sati Declaration, he had actually told the heads of state, let us form a united military force right now before you guys leave. And some of them were just laughing at him. People like Zuma, Jacob Zuma, were just laughing at, at Muammar Gaddafi. So the Nigerian president, all these people. I think this reminds me of one writer is called Ajemang Opoku, who wrote a book called Nkrumah and the Congo. He said that in some way it's like the Africans, they want to be saved, but they don't want a savior. They want to be saved, they want to be free, but they don't want somebody to lead the process of freedom. And this is how they treated Nkrumah when you look at what happened in 1963 and also what happened in 2002 during the Sati Declaration, which led to the transformation of the Organization of African Unity into the African Union because the same things which Nkrumah was calling for in 1963 and heads of state refused, they are the same things which Muammar Gaddafi was calling for in 2002, and the heads of state again refused and they walked away. And of course, what followed is destruction. And that is where we are today, continued destruction. So the performance of these institutions, of course, we are going to further reflect on that. Back to you, Mahlet.
Thank you, Kwame, for that. Now, before I go to the second question, let me just, you don't like what here. It's a viewer here. I have tolerated you so many times, so that by being here you can learn. But it seems that you have passed that red line. Now, you have commented in Rwanda fight genocide between Hutu and Tutsi had also nothing to do with, oh, seriously, go read. Yeah,
No,
it's
he's
your
from
people.
France. So
Yeah.
he's from
Well,
France.
with that,
Mm.
I am gladly
He's from France, so he's trying
that
to protect the French image. That's why he's here. That's why he's here.
was
So
stupid.
France is sending such people all across the platform
Yeah.
because they are facing a lot of backlash.
Yeah. So now I really wanted you to touch, if you can tell us quickly the reason how ECOWAS was born, actually, if that's possible. If not, we'll just go to, analyzing what they have done so far.
Yeah, so the ECOWAS, the formation of ECOWAS, of course, was the purpose was to continue what majority of the African leaders who were moving cautiously, when it comes to the creation of the United States of Africa. So it was in that spirit that they wanted to form a regional group or community of countries in the West African region. But mostly the creation of these regional economic communities, as you hear it, it was for economics only, because they believed that we need the most important point for us to work on is the economics. We should work on the economics, and then when we are all maybe rich, we have all become rich, then we can unify. So all of a sudden, when we have solved our problems gradually as Africans, our economic problems and social problems, then we can come together and unify into a unified African state. And of course, this is what Nkrumah was against, because Nkrumah was a man in a hurry. He was not in a hurry because he wanted to be the president of Africa. He was not in a hurry because he wanted to be the ultimate leader, is a powerful man on the African continent. But he was in a hurry looking at our condition. He looked at the conditions of the African people, and the conditions were very bad. The illiteracy, the diseases. So he looked at the industrialization, because he lived in the United States. He studied in the United States for 10 years. And he went and lived in England for some time. So he saw the levels of development there. He wanted to see these things also come to Africa. He wanted these things present in Africa. And so he believed that there's no reason we can't have them. We have the same capacity. We have the same intelligence. So you can hear these things in his speeches in 1957 when he was speaking. The black man is going to demonstrate, he's ready to demonstrate to the world that he can be somebody, such a way. He believed we are going to demonstrate to the world, we are going to construct our own African personality and identity. So he wanted us to have technology and rapidly and have improved, lives. Our lives should be able to improve, and we should have all these technology, but we should not lose our personality as Africans in how we dress, how we walk, how we speak, how we approach music, all these things. He was looking at them. Now, his approach was that these things we are talking about in ECOWAS, Economic Community of African States, this is an economic community. It's not a political community. He said that these things we will be able to achieve them if we unify politically. That is why he used to use the saying that seek ye first the political kingdom, and all the other things shall be added unto you. You remember we spoke here about the capture of the political system by the West. This is what they understand. That is why they are so terrified that the political system in Niger has been taken over. This is what Nkrumah, this is Nkrumah's superior understanding. This is why Nkrumah's understanding was so much superior above everyone, because he understood how society is organized, and he diagnosed the problems to the point that he went up to the last point. So he understood that society is organized from the political level, which people like who are creating ECOWAS did not understand. So that in that they continued and went ahead to create ECOWAS with the treaty of 1950s, 1975 in Lagos. They signed the ECOWAS treaty on the 28th of May in 1975. That is when they formed the ECOWAS, but majorly, it was for the economic advancement and cooperation of these states. But even that, we can't say that has been achieved, because you remember in 2017, I think 2017, 2018, they wanted to form a currency for economic community, but because of the interests of France was able to fight against the formation of a single currency in West Africa. So in all, you can only conclude that they are just sabotaging the interests of the African people in ECOWAS. They are not achieving anything, but rather sabotaging the interests of the African people whenever they rise up, for them to maintain themselves in power, and also to continue to allow colonialism to advance in the region. So this is what we are seeing right now from their behavior. So this is what it is briefly about ECOWAS.
Now, have they, this institution, African Union, ECOWAS, and others, achieved anything, particularly, for the reasons that they are created for?
Yeah.
Can we
So the African Union, for example, the African Union people say it has achieved something, because when it was Organization of African Unity, some claim that it was formed. The African Union, when it was formed, it was given the mandate of helping to liberate the rest of the countries which had not been liberated. Because remember, when it was formed, about 32 countries were already independent. Those were the ones which were present at the formation of Organization of African Unity in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. There were 32 independent states. So a few other countries, had remained under the domination of colonialism. So they gave it a mandate of continuing that process. And so they even established a liberation committee, whose headquarters was based in Arusha, where President Nyerere was. So in all, the gradualists, those people who wanted regionalism, they succeeded. That is what it meant. So they sidelined Nkrumah, and even in 1954, they went ahead to sign the Cairo Declaration, which said that countries should not interfere in the affairs of others. And they mean the colonial countries. But when they talk about this interference, the colonial countries can come and interfere whatever they want. So what they were saying is that Africans have no right to interfere in their own affairs, but the colonialists have the right to interfere in the affairs of African countries. But Africans cannot interfere in their own affairs. And so this is what went ahead, to work. So in the whole, for ECOWAS and the other regional bodies, the East African community, collapsed when President Idi Amin came to power, for example. So they have been, actually, Nkrumah predicted whatever is happening to them, because Nkrumah's outlook was that these bodies, they are going to create space for the balkanization of Africa. They are going to create space for Africa's enemies to enter into the continent and start disorganizing the continent. Instead, we should form a single political body, single United African Union government, so that we can block off these people who are disturbing. So when they did not listen, now what is happening is that everything he predicted, the overthrow of leaders, because he told them in 1963 that if we live here without formation of a union government, we are going to be overthrown one by one. And that is what happened. When they left Addis Ababa, a lot of leaders started dying. France started coups. And so he was sort of like a prophet. Olympio was killed. Tafa Balewa of Nigeria, actually, if you go and read his speech, he was saying that what Nkrumah is talking about, that he was saying that he was sort of mocking Nkrumah, that what Nkrumah is talking about, the African personality, for him, he doesn't believe in that African personality. He's a human being. He believes in humanity. When he went back to Nigeria, he was shot. He was assassinated. So, and it was the working of course, of imperialism. So Olympio is the same thing. Actually, the death of Olympio is the one which led to the Cairo Declaration. And they came together because they thought that it was Nkrumah who assassinated Olympio in Togo, because Nkrumah had met Olympio and told Olympio that let us unify Togo and Ghana so that we have one country. And Olympio refused. But Olympio, at the same time, he did not want to work with the French. He wanted to have some sort of an independent Togo, which is a very small country. So, like, if you look at his thinking, you can really not understand how he was thinking, that you reject Pan-Africanism, you reject working with the Pan-Africanists, and then you reject France at the same time. You want to be a lone island seated in one spot. So he was killed by the French. And now they planted it on Nkrumah. Everyone suspected that it is Nkrumah because they knew that Nkrumah had approached him to unify Ghana and Togo, and Olympia. So everyone, the imperialists, they used that as a chance to put everything on Nkrumah. And Nkrumah was isolated on the African stage. Even during the Cairo Declaration in Cairo, they did not invite him. During that period, they started isolating Ghana and not giving it leadership on the continent. So they formed, that is when they signed that Cairo Declaration of the non-interference in affairs of other African states. So that is what happened. So these organizations, when you look, we are still backwards economically, because this is what they say that is the mandate. SADC, South Africa Development Community, is supposed to be for development, economic development. But if you look at the conditions, we are not developing. Now, what is the continent facing? Majorly, they are the things which Nkrumah spoke about, which were supposed to be solved. These problems were supposed to be solved by a unified continental government. There are security issues. You can see silencing the guns has not been achieved. And then the aggression of imperialism, is it not what we are facing right now? Sanctions against Eritrea, sanctioned by the imperialists against Zimbabwe, threats against South Africa, and pressure, all pressure. Now they are holding back loans from Uganda. They are interfering. So these are all the things which Nkrumah said. And he told them that the regional bodies, they cannot solve this. The only thing which they can do, all they can be able to do, is to band up, to collaborate with imperialists. And that is what we are seeing with ECOWAS. So everything as he said it. So I cannot point to one thing that these regional bodies have achieved for us ever since they were formed. For the case of ECOWAS, as we mentioned in 1975, I cannot point out one thing that ECOWAS has achieved. When they have a passport, but even that passport, maybe you can speak of the East African community has tried a little bit, but they still have wrangles. You still have Kenya signing agreements with the East African community, with the European Union, without the other member states of the East African community. So it shows you that they are not achieving what they are intended to.
The bigger
In
names.
ECOWAS itself, they have.
They say even like even not even AU functions like they do. They really boast about themselves. What about economically? Like people can travel, movement of people is allowed within those African countries,
Yeah,
right?
so in the East African region, they can travel.
In
But in West
ECOWAS.
Africa, I've heard it is very difficult. Yeah, in ECOWAS. In East African Community, EAC, they can travel. In SADC, it is not there. In ECOWAS, I hear it is difficult. That is what I hear from the look of things, because of the interests of France and then the interests of Britain at the same time, that these are two different players who still have influence. Now, this is what Nkrumah wanted to eliminate, this influence. He said that if we do not, eliminate this influence, there's no way we are going to develop if we don't fail.
The
I mean,
military,
if there's no way
the
we're going to
wing,
develop.
when does it come? When did it, like it was there from the formation, or it was set up during the
No,
Liberia case?
yes, it was set up. The military group ECOMOG was formed to help to stabilize the situation and intervene in Liberia to stabilize the situation in Liberia. But it was not formed immediately when ECOWAS was formed.
Wow. So now, since
Mhm.
there's nothing that they have achieved, I mean, almost, but let's talk about the failures and the why. Why it is so hard for the African Union to work for the people, to have that power, how the people want it to be. There are some problems we know, but and then for also for the regional, isn't it because the AU do not have that power, that the regionals seem they have more power than the AU. But why they fail to achieve? Is it financially they are funded? Also, it's good to talk about that part. Are they funded also? We know about the AU, it's almost all its programs are funded by outside. What about the regionals? What is the reason?
So that is part, because there's some sort of misuse of resources. That one you can say it. We have repeatedly mentioned here that the African continent, its GDP is much bigger. It could be the fifth biggest economy in the world if you combine our GDP, all of us, up to more than $3.5 trillion. So our GDP is much bigger than a lot of countries. We could be the fifth biggest economy or the fourth biggest economy across the world. But now that speaks to the misuse of resources, because countries which have this much GDP are able to manage their affairs, including the military and peace and economics. So you can speak to the negligence. There's a lot of negligence on the side of the African heads of state. And of course, we have imperialism on the other side, which has gone on to capture in the same way which Nkrumah mentioned. In the same way Nkrumah mentioned, the imperialism has gone on to capture the institutions. He has gone on to capture them as Nkrumah warned us. So that is why you see that capture has come with the funding, and they remove anyone who wants to make these institutions independent. Like they removed the Gaddafi. Gaddafi was financing 50% of the budget of the African Union. Libya is the one who was, funding this. So they saw this as a problem because they want to keep the continent dependent on them, not necessarily dependent on them, but they want to keep it in their control. So they use this excuse of giving aid and help to have that control. So the point is, control is not really aid as such, because there's no such thing as aid, since they are taking much more compared to what they are bringing into the continent. So we cannot conclude that. So to overcome these challenges, it needs political will on the side of the heads of state. But because many of them now are accustomed to this behavior whereby they are not suffering as their people are suffering, so they think that is normal. They are now used to, working or operating alongside imperialism. They are used to that. They are used to working alongside imperialism. So they see now, they see it as normal. So until something very strong, which is supposed to shock them, is supposed to come up. And as you are seeing now, with the way ECOWAS is operating, it shows you that if something serious shocks them, they are willing to act. And now in this case, they are acting, of course, for the negative, for all the wrong reasons, but they are acting in urgency. So if they acted in this, with this form of urgency against imperialism when it is destroying our continent, if they acted with this sense of urgency when it comes to the economic aspect of things, then these regional bodies would be effective. But if they cannot act in the interest of the African people with this urgency, then this is what is informing us that these have been captured and they are acting on the orders of foreign forces, which is the imperialists, the United States and Europe, and all the groups which are interested in continuing to exploit the African continent, and they feel that they are entitled to the exploitation of the African continent. So this is what I can see that has, limited these groups, these regional groups, from operating as they are supposed to operate.
You kind of mentioned what what changes, what in terms of changes that are needed to make it functional or effective. But if there are more, I want you to go really in detail and what are those changes that are needed, because basically what we see now, the African Union and even now ECOWAS, as we have observed in the last 2 weeks, they just repeat or echo what the UN and the EU says. They don't even have their own stance, their own things, to come and say that considered the people that lives in their land, in their territory. They just repeat what the UN says. Now, and if so, if after you list those changes, what in the first place prevented to make those changes? And do even our heads of states are ready to make that? Do they even know that change is needed? Or are they just living in
I
cloud
think
nine?
a lot of them, they know that those changes are needed. I think it was in 2018, they started to carry out what they called, I think it is 2014, they appointed President Kagame to carry out reforms on the African Union itself. And of course, that included the fact that they should look at a mechanism, they should come up with a mechanism of self-funding the African Union. But according to his report and what he came up with as recommendations, majority of the African states and heads of state, they are not respecting these resolutions, these recommendations, which were made by the committee which was appointed, and it was led by President Kagame for the reformation of the organization. So even when he's speaking, President Kagame, you can hear it that they don't respect, what the African Union does. So they prefer to sit and just neglect, neglect what is going on with the organization. So it is only when their power is threatened that you see that they have come and they look very serious. But for them, the behavior, is very disturbing. The behavior of the African heads of state is very disturbing, that they only react when their power is threatened. That is the only time they react, bring out militaries, brutalize the people. But when it comes to the fight against imperialism, like how you saw Brahim Traore was complaining about the African heads of state that they don't give any support to people who are fighting against imperialism. Instead, they are calling them junta, what, and all these kind of names. So it shows you that I think there's a lack of ambition in the generation, and I think that this is, of course, this is good for us as young people. Now, this puts us in a position whereby we should realize that we have a lot of work to do, but more so at the work of unifying ourselves and working together as a continent is the most fundamental. But we cannot work together if we don't unify the African continent. That means building it. But of course, even in the process of liberating the continent, we will face challenges, but we have to work together. We have to find a way of working together as the young people, the next generation of people, because these are all lessons for us. And these people, of course, their time is going to come, and they are going to go away. So we have to learn from these mistakes. If we do not learn from this history, then that will be, very deadly for us as the next generation of people. It will be extremely dangerous for us as the next generation of people. But all in all, the creation of more regional organizations, NEPAD, I hear NEPAD what and what, all these, they create more problems and they create more divisions in the continent. And Nkrumah discouraged all these things.
And
So while
spending more
creating these
money.
things,
Look at NEPAD now. NEPAD
yes,
is gone.
yes, duplication, and even duplication of activities. You are duplicating things which you are doing and wasting a lot of money, leaving the continent open. So you leave the continent open, and then anyone can come in and exploit. The United States shifts its wars with other civilizations, its problems with other civilizations. It brings them to the African continent and wants to fight them from the African continent. So this is what we are seeing that is happening, that you leave, if you create these regional bodies and you leave them there, you open the continent, and you create spaces where imperialism is going to stand and is going to base to use, to interfere in everything you are doing inside. And you can never progress, because according to economists, you need about 7% economic growth consistently for around 10 to 20 years for an economy to be felt, for the benefits of the economy to be felt by all individuals. But every time we are growing, you see that, starting 2010, 2010, we had started growing, we had started having some growth on the African continent. And whenever we are doing that, the Europeans and their organizations, they will come and interfere in the continent and put a brake on our growth. And this happened also after independence. When we had gotten independence, countries like Ghana were growing rapidly under Kwame Nkrumah, and all the other countries, they came and interfered. They are fighting communism and all these things, and they started fighting those things on the African continent. They retarded progress which Africa was making, overthrew a lot of governments. So this led to a lot of retardation, and of course they imposed the structural adjustments, which impoverished our people more. It destroyed the industries and factories on the African continent. Right now, when we were growing, as you have heard in the past few years, people were saying African economies are growing rapidly. Now they are interfering again to put a brake on that growth. Ethiopia has been growing almost at around 10%. Other countries have been growing at 8%. Now you are seeing they are interfering everywhere, in every place. Niger, South Africa, now Uganda, they have been interfering in Ethiopia. So all these are bringing problems, on the African continent. But all this is because of these regional bodies. If we do not do away with them, then we are in so much trouble. We are going to be in very much trouble. So the only way to go is for us to unify the continent and get a political body, strengthen ourselves with a single military, then these people have to be driven out. And I'm afraid to say we cannot drive them out with peace. We cannot negotiate with them. We are going to have to use force, and we have to embrace the fact that we have to take that responsibility. We have to embrace that responsibility, that it is our responsibility to protect the continent. And that means we have to use force to eject the United States and its militaries and the Europeans from the continent. If we cannot do that, we are in for a very deadly, more aggressive and more brutal slavery that is coming against our people. Death, destruction, more exploitation, more ruthless exploitation is what will come after us. So that is the problem that we are likely to face if we do not work together, if we do not abolish the regional bodies that are being used against the interest of the African people by their puppets, of course, while they are in the back of the room. So we have to work together to be able to abolish these organizations that are pretending that they are African, but they are working against the interests of the African people. And such organizations, such as ECOWAS, where there is full of puppets who don't have any interest in Africa but themselves and the interests of the African people.
Thank you very much, Kwame. Yeah, with that, we are covered for today. What we want to achieve, we want to cover regarding, analyzing this the African institution, the African Commission, the African Union Commission, and then the regional bodies within it. Yeah, we kind of give you its historical background and then their achievement and then the pitfalls and then kind of the way forward for it. What should we do? But prior to that, we also have done updates on Niger, which is important. So I've been looking at some of your comments, as we always do. Today, exactly, we finished at this is 1 hour. Let's give it the next maybe 10 minutes or 7 minutes if Kwame allows me. I will start from the last, okay? Because the US sees that their days of hegemony and I see that Osie Ekwam has raised important thing. He says, he or she, hello everyone, I have been paying close attention to the remarks and behavior of the Nigerian officials. It appears to me they are hyper arrogant because they dominate ECOWAS. Can this be changed? It directly relates with our subject. So Kwame, you cannot skip this.
Yeah, so I think that, not all, like we saw the Nigerian Senate voted and refused any military involvement. So I think you cannot say all of them. Mm-hmm. And even when you look at the meeting itself, when they are sitting down, this guy who's reading these things, the resolutions of the ECOWAS meeting that happened today, you can see that a lot of people are really not satisfied in there. They are called. It looks like something is not right. And even the person who's reading it, it looks like it's being forced. Somebody is forcing him to read these things. But the Europeans, of course, are in the background, and the Americans, they are the ones who are driving. So it's not necessarily in Nigeria, because the elders in Nigeria have refused, especially, for example, in the seven states which are at the border with Nigeria. They have the senators met Tinubu after voting in the Nigerian Senate. They refused the military intervention, but the United States and the Europeans are continuously pushing so that they can attack and destroy and create a lot of chaos, in the region to protect their exploitation and greed. This is the reason they are there. So, yeah, of course, there's those who are arrogant and they're supporting, but I wouldn't say all of them are the Nigerian people. A lot of them, they refused this. They rejected this intervention because it will be only catastrophic for for the Africans, and is the Africans who are going to die. The Europeans are not going to die. They are far off. What they are interested in is the exploitation of Africa's resources. So they are just watching, pushing you so you can fight, and they can continue to exploit the resources, exploit your gas, exploit the uranium. This is what they are interested in: create chaos, create militant groups. And they did this starting in 2012, with the overthrow of President Gaddafi. When they overthrew him, then they opened the spaces, and they brought their so-called Al-Qaeda and what from the Middle East. They are the ones who brought these things. So these just their tricks. These are their tricks. They are using this to dominate the place and take over and have groups, militant groups. They will be funding these militant groups. We saw in Mali that when they overthrew, they chased away France. They saw that France was supporting the militant groups. They were giving them money and weapons. And we are seeing even right now in Niger, France went and released the terrorists. In Niger, is still interfering in Niger even right now. Newland is there to cause chaos. We know Victoria Newland. She's somebody who's bloodthirsty. She's there to cause chaos in the region. That is why they have deployed her, because they know, the United States government knows that she's very effective at creating chaos, creating death, creating destruction. That is why they have deployed her to come to work in Africa, when she's not supposed to be the one to do this job of enhancing the United States' relationship with Africa. That is not her job. But they have sent her because they know that she's very good at, she's an expert at creating this chaos and death and destruction. So this is why they have sent her. So not all of Nigeria, actually majority of the Nigerians, they don't agree with this. And of course, it is unfortunate that Nigeria has a lot of voting power in ECOWAS, because it pays majority of the money of the budget for ECOWAS. So I think that is why it has. And of course, even during the formation, the organization was formed in Nigeria in 1975 in Lagos. Yeah, so these are some of the reasons. The biggest economy, with over, not only in ECOWAS, but also across the continent. And so we have complained in the past, even on this channel, that Nigeria is not playing its role on this continent. Instead of helping the continent to overcome colonialism, is instead working with the enemies of the African continent. But this does not mean it is the Nigerian people who are doing that. This is just a few corrupt people who are doing this and selling, the African people out to the colonialists, so that we can be brutalized and re-enslaved while they benefit. They have most of their children in Britain. Tinubu, the treatment he gets from France when he's sick, so their children, their daughters, when they want to give birth, they don't give birth in Nigeria. They go to Britain and France, the United States. This is where they give birth. And while our mothers and sisters are dying in hospitals where there's no medicine on the floors, there's no beds and stuff like that. So it's not everyone. It's the ruling class. The problem we have is the ruling class in Africa, which is very much out of touch with the reality. And this is a problem that we have to find a solution for as Africans. We have to find a solution. That one I can guarantee you that we will find a solution for the problem.
Okay, I'm going to go to the next comment. I saw something interesting. Nigeria has become, the Judas of Africa. They betrayed Libya and now Niger. Nigerians are not in support only one man, the President Tinubu. I don't know what that means. Okay. Can the smaller states have some veto? It appears Nigeria now feels they can invade any ECOWAS states at will. This cannot be good. No, I don't think they can do that. But I read that they are the biggest in terms of military. The majority of the military comes from ECOWAS, because the others, anyway, we have heard it's under the control of those of you who have been here during our streaming a couple of days ago, was it on Wednesday that we did unfolding all that colonial tax, and one of the agreement is for the military to be trained in France. So the two countries that are not controlled by France are there in Nigeria, which ironically, which it is now, and Ghana. Is Gambia the member? No, it's not. Is it member? No. Or yes?
Yes,
It is
yes.
member. Okay.
Zambia is a member.
Gambia. Okay, good. What else? African last born. You are a very controversial person, but I just let you stay here. The older generation are worse than the younger generation about liberation. Well, what older generation you are? The older generation, that the existing one, or our ancestors? What are you referring to? I read also you put Nigerians are not in support. Okay, France and America hijacked the meeting. And others, kind of controversial message here, but yeah, okay. Maybe you are on a wrong platform. So Africa, you think they will ever let Africa to be free? Well, our freedom is in our own hand. What weakened the AU majorly is foreign funding. At least the OAU was funded by its member states. I mean, after it became AU, it's the more we see more and more involvement of the foreign powers. The other one was, I think, when it was OAU, it was more closed, wasn't it? I mean, it wasn't open that much for powers.
Yeah, the major, especially at the formation stage when they were fighting, majority of the African countries contributed. If you remember the struggle to liberate South Africa, majority of the African countries contributed. So majorly the African countries were contributing.
Okay.
So it was not so there was not so much influence from the outside, but they went ahead and they laxed, and the negligence, I think, is too much. The negligence is too much. Like, people, they should not be sitting in Ethiopia, it's sitting in Uganda and Kenya, and think the things which are happening in Niger, or they're happening in the Sahel or Gambia, they are not concerned. I mean, this attitude which the presidents have is very painful. Is really painful. Is extremely painful. Is very painful, because these people who are killing us and they want to extract Africa's resources, they don't look at us as whatever. You are thinking Kenya, you are thinking, or Gambia, you are thinking, or Rwanda. You see that the people in Rwanda, the leaders in Rwanda, you look at the foreign minister of foreign affairs, he's saying that if we fix the problems in our country, various countries, everything is okay. Africa will be okay. This kind of thinking, which is very is laughable. It shows somebody who is in a very wrong position of leadership even. So some of these people, they don't read the history itself. So they just get a chance and they are appointed to these positions, and so they come and just say all kind of nonsensical things like that. So it's very problematic. So not only him, but I've just seen that the majority of the leaders are negligent of the responsibility which they are supposed to have towards the protection of their continent. And that is why these foreign forces are coming and interfering everywhere. And it makes the rest of the citizens look helpless. And that is why, of course, there has not been any emergency meeting by ECOWAS on our people who are dying in the Mediterranean going to Europe. There's no emergency meeting, but there's emergency meeting when they are being forced to protect the colonial interests. So their citizens, if they are dying, they don't think that it makes sense for them to have an emergency meeting. So this is where we have problems. and we have
Most
to
of
solve
them
this problem.
actually, even they pass, they're just dormant. It's a non-active state. These Western African countries, especially the ones who are who used to be French colony, and the presidents, even they really spend most of the time. I hear, for example, some years back, Cameroon, and actually, it used to be a news. It's for people from Cameroon told me it used to be a news when if the president is in the country, because most of the time, normally the news is when they leave, right? Yeah.
He's very old.
Um,
So, but France is there, is supporting him. He's working with France.
Okay,
So
CNS tells us Ghana, Guinea, Mali, Morocco, Egypt, Algeria, and Tunisia were the Casablanca group that wanted immediate unification with the capital city either in Leopoldville, now Kinshasa, in DRC, or Bangui in CAR. Thank you, CNS, for your always valuable input. Everyone, actually. Uh, While we are talking, the imperialists declare war on Niger Republic. The so-called regional bodies are now controlled by the imperialists through democracy. It looks like you're taking a pleasure by writing this. That's what I sense. Anyway, seeing this, the central pillar of the UN revolves around two items: sovereign equality among nations, and then number two, non-interference in the internal affairs of other states. Going by this, everybody has to let Niger just be. Well, it's quite the opposite that the UN have been doing. They have been interfering in all sovereign countries. I think that of putting the forces on standby is an attempt at ramping up pressure on Niger. It could be that they're saving their own face, but we will see. Yeah. French Africa does not realize that the pact for continuation of colonization they signed in the 60s is non-binding. It can only be broken with coups and wars. Okay. Yeah, I think I tried to see what I think are highlights for today. But everyone, thank you. Thank you for watching from, from North America, from the Caribbean. Anyone from Africa, please give thumbs up if you are from the continent. Yeah, Gambia, so saying this added Gambia, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Ghana. Was it Ghana? Yeah. Nigeria, Guinea-Bissau, Cape Verde are not members directly under French influence. Yeah. But officially, ECOWAS has 14 countries or 15. 15.
15.
Yeah.
They officially have 15 countries.
But there are indirect members also, what they call. Right. All right, then. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being here. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and then share with your network. Thank you very much. Continue engaging. And yeah, that's it. Tomorrow again, maybe with another topic, we will be here. Until then, Kwame, thank you also for your time, for everything. And ciao, ciao. Bye-bye. Continue to support us. Don't forget, go to the description section and yeah, you can support us through our PayPal account. Anything is good. Ciao, ciao. Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.